moderator. Wonderful. Hello and welcome to our webinar today, the 5 pillars of permanent weight loss and the little known secret to achieving them with ease. I'm your host, certified Nuaria Method trainer and mentor, Lori Montry. I'm super excited to spend this time with you today. You know you're in the right place if you're somebody who wants to overcome unwanted patterns, challenges with food and lose weight, improve your relationship with your body. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. My main objective is to obviously teach you what are those 5 pillars of successful permanent weight loss and without restriction, without dieting, without failing again, and also share with you the secret to achieving them, right? Because obviously knowing about them is wonderful and great, but if you aren't able to implement them, then they're not helpful to you. So those are the things that we're going to be focusing on today. I just want to start by telling you a little bit about me and how I came to do this work. I had a lot of challenges, you might say, as a young child, and right around age 4 or 5, I really started using food to help me cope with life. And by the time I was, say, 6, I was pretty chubby. And my mom, who struggled her whole life with her weight and her body image, she didn't want that for me. So she took me to the doctor. I was put on my first diet around 6 years old. But I didn't know what I was doing, right? I knew that food made me fat. So if I can just avoid it as much as possible, then I won't be fat anymore, right? Perfect reasoning about a 6-year-old mind. So I started to restrict as much as I could, but we all know what restriction does. It fuels unwanted behaviors. So I got into the binge restrict cycle and was really relying on food to help me cope with any and every unpleasant emotion that I had. And so I stayed there for about 30 years. And my dieting career was not only was it not successful, but it really took over my whole life. I was, always thinking about my how I could control myself with food, how I could stop doing the things that I didn't like that I was doing with food, stop overeating, stop, chronic dieting, all the things that made it really difficult to just live life. And that's kind of where I was stuck for, like I said, about 30 years. And at that time in my life, I would have laughed hysterically at the idea that I would come to a point in my life where I wouldn't think about food unless I was hungry. I would be able to stop eating when I first felt satisfied, that I would be able to truly enjoy food. Like, I would have laughed at you. Like, yeah, that's for other people. I might be able to learn how to control myself, maybe someday. That was my hope. But all those other things, I was like, forget it. Like that could never happen for me. So let me tell you about my relationship with food today. I have a beautiful relationship with food. I really do not think about food unless my stomach is rumbling. I am able to stop when I feel satisfied and having truly enjoyed the food. And all of this means I'm at my perfect weight that I maintain. I don't try. It's just, this is just what happens for me and where I am today. And all of this means that I have freed up energy, right? Time, energy, life force that used to go into trying to figure out how to deal with my food situation, right? Now that that's no longer on the table for me, I have all this time and energy and desire and passion to put into the things that make my life really meaningful and lovely, my relationships, my coaching practice. So it's really a beautiful thing, not only with respect to my health and my weight and all that, but with respect to my whole life, right? Because now I don't have to be caught up in that struggle anymore. So maybe you can relate to that place where I was talking about, for where I was for 30 years, that place of frustration, that place of, why can't I control myself? Why do I do these things, with food that I know are not serving me? So if that is you, I invite you just to kind of take a moment right now and ask yourself how your life could be different if you didn't have that struggle anymore. If food was just whatever, it's just food. I got hungry, I ate this food, it felt good in my body, and now I'm off doing my other things and just not worrying about any of that. It's pretty incredible. And I know that it is available for you. That's why I am doing this webinar, laying out the bigger picture for you so you can really see what the pieces are and how you can be effective in meeting those pieces and kind of, checking them off once and for all. So with all of that in mind, let's go ahead and dive into the 5 pillars. Make sure you're taking a few notes. I do have some downloads that will be available to you in the Freedom Channel, so I'll mention when those are available so you won't have to scribble quite so fast, but do make sure that you're writing down. I'm going to give you the pillar, and then I'm going to give you something that you can take away today and really start to use in order to start to play with the pillar. Now, this is an outline more or less of the Freedom Program. So obviously the Freedom Program is something that we spend months on because that's how change happens, right? When you really dive into something and give yourself the opportunity to learn it and to integrate it into your life. But I really think that what I'm giving you today is something that you can start to make progress with. So I'm going to give you the pillar, and then I'm going to give you a tool and invite you to start using it and start integrating it and seeing what kind of shifts happen for you as you do that. So pillar 1 is developing self-compassion and acceptance for where you are today, even as you reach for the changes that you want. All right, now accepting yourself today does not mean in any way that you are giving up. It doesn't mean that you are not going to have the motivation to make the changes. A lot of people will say that, well, if I'm not disliking myself, then I'm just gonna stay right where I am. I need that motivation. I need that push in order to make any changes, but it's not true. And it doesn't work that way. When you are able to honor your body and love it and want to nourish it, you're going to take actions that are aligned with that. And the actions that you take are going to be so much easier to take than when you're coming from a place of punishment. I need to fix my body. Something's wrong with me. And it sounds subtle. Like, how could such a simple thing is a mindset shift, a perspective like that? How could that really be so impactful? But it is. And, I watch people all the time. They will struggle for years, for decades against themselves, convincing themselves that they're terrible the way they are. And that's the only attitude that's going to help them shift. And time and again, when they learn this principle and really start to adopt it and apply it, it's as if the body says, oh, all right, you're ready to work with me. We're friends now. Okay, then I'll work with you, right? And until that point, it's just struggle. It's just confrontation. And when we're in that energy of not liking ourselves, not having compassion for ourselves, that energy, that the emotional state causes us to act in ways that are not helpful. So on many different levels, that principle of accepting yourself is so important. And it's really easy for me to sit here and talk about that. Hey, accept yourself, have some compassion, right? But it's so much different to apply that principle to actually, how do I do that? I've not done that in my life. What does that look like, right? Because we've spent so much time not being accepting. So what I'd like to bring to you today is kind of a different perspective on your body as just one aspect of this self-acceptance and compassion. And I really want to invite you to explore the idea that your body is perfectly okay exactly as it is today. And that doesn't mean, hey, I want to become healthier, or, I don't feel like the outside of my body matches who I am on the inside. It doesn't mean any of that. That's reality, and that's okay. But the idea that your body is perfect and beautiful and whole and complete and all of that today can also be true, right? Now, this is something also, we can hear this, but in order to really change that perspective and think about ourselves as being perfectly fine the way we are, it can take some effort. So what I'd like to do is, first of all, convince you that the reason why you don't think your body is perfectly okay today is because you've been fed that, right, by various sources. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But you've been told that bodies need to look a certain way, or heavy bodies are not okay, and so they need to be, treated poorly, or whatever it is. But those are just thoughts, right? You may think of it as a belief, but beliefs are just repeated thoughts. And we can develop new thoughts, right? When we look at the old thought and we understand how we got there, why we believe the things that we believe, we can start to replace that with something that serves us better. So let's just think for a minute, body image is just your idea of how your body is perceived by others. A negative body image arises when we internalize the expectations of others and make them our own. So when we do this, we kind of look to our bodies to give us worth and value. And this greatly affects, of course, your self-esteem. So let's talk a little bit about the sources that gave us our perception of our bodies and whether or not they're okay today. The media is certainly one of the biggest contributors to our body image, right? And despite the large body diversity that exists in the population, the media uses less than a body image that is consistent with less than 5% of the population. So we see our, TV anchor women, our weather women, our leading roles, our, wherever we look, we're seeing women who represent less than 5% of the population, which means 95% of bodies are underrepresented. We also don't see these bodies as they really are, right? We've got all the photoshopping and the filters and all the things that are done to these bodies to make them look a certain way. And I love the quote Cindy Crawford once said. She said, "I wish I looked like Cindy Crawford." And she was, commenting on the fact that obviously with all the things that are done to her image, she doesn't look like that every day, right? And so when we compare ourselves and hold this 5% that doesn't even look the way that they're portrayed, and we compare ourselves, of course, we're going to feel like we're falling short, even though it's not a realistic kind of comparison. So, the media, obviously a really important, a big area of source of knowledge for what we believe our bodies should be like. And of course, why does the media do that? Well, advertisers, all the products that we have out there are dependent on a society that thinks that they are broken in some way, that they need to be fixed, so that these products can be offered and purchased by these people to fix their perceived flaws. So it's, pretty obvious why we would want to, or why the media would do these things, why this would be the way that people are represented. Other sources of body messages where you got the idea that your body needs to be a certain way in order to be valuable and worthwhile, is your family. Of course, really big source of information about your body. And, sometimes those messages are very overt. I've had a lot of clients tell me their families would say things like, "You're too fat. You're never going to find a man unless you lose weight." I mean, sometimes the messages are very overt. Sometimes they're subtle. Sometimes they're not even about you. It's comments about other people, or, little girls see their mothers as the most beautiful things on earth. And so when a little girl hears their mom criticize her own body, or say, "Oh, I shouldn't have done that," or "I wish I looked different," or whatever, that sets the little girl up to think, well, who am I to think that, gosh, if my mom is thinking that about herself, what must be true about me? So these messages are strong, and they are, woven into everyday life. Peers obviously are an important contributor to how we see ourselves and our body image. Toys, right? Barbie. I always make the point that if Barbie was an actual person, she'd be about 30 pounds underweight. She would not menstruate. In fact, she probably wouldn't have the energy to get out of bed and go to the beach, go to, Malibu Barbie. She probably wouldn't be able to go to the beach, actually. She would not probably be able to go to her veterinarian practice or her astronaut job or much of anything else because of malnourishment. So why we're giving these dolls to girls and encouraging them to do these things but look like this, I don't know. But the point is, we are fed these messages all the time, and that's why it's hard for you to stand today and accept the body that you're in, even while you work to make the changes that you want to make to feel better. But if we kind of step back and recognize why I have a hard time accepting my body the way it is, you can start to see that you have a choice, right? You can follow the old beliefs, or you don't have to be subject to them, right? You can start to see yourself in a little bit different way. And just to remind you that, this is just a societal thing that is really just right now, right? Because there have been many periods of time in the past where heavier bodies were favored. If you look at some of the beautiful art from the Baroque era and partly in the Renaissance, you'll see Peter Paul Rubens painting these voluptuous, beautiful bodies. There was a period in Japan where the elite class wanted their women to be as plump as possible because it showed that the man had the money to feed her. Pioneer women they wanted them to be heavier and stockier because they were going to be more resilient and be able to give more children. So it's like, this is really truly just something that was created in this current society. And I don't say that about the heavier bodies to say, oh, that's a better system or that's better. Neither one is better, right? Bodies are not inherently more worthy because of their size. And we can look at that and remind ourselves, like, okay, there's this thing going on with the media and whatever, but I don't have to succumb to that. I don't have to not like my body. I don't have to not like myself because I am not where, this group of people would say I need to be. And when we start to look at that and realize, there's nothing inherently worthy about one body versus another, we can start to develop a little bit more grace for ourselves and where we are. And remember, there's nothing wrong with where you are today. Doesn't mean you don't want to change, because it will feel better, and for whatever reason it is for you. But we also don't need to hate ourselves into our goals, right? And that never works. It's kind of like trying to type a document with your right hand and your left hand keeps pulling it away, right? It's just not going to work. So what can we do, right? This is obviously something that need to be consistent with over a period of time. I know that me saying these things feels great in this moment, and it's like, yeah, I don't have to hate myself. Yeah, all these things. But we're going to go back out into the world. We're going to see it. We're used to thinking that way. So it does take some effort to start to change and see yourself and offer yourself love and compassion, even though you're not where you quite want to be yet. So what I have for you in this area is Body Love Worksheet. It is just a chance for you to kind of explore your personal relationship with your body and what you can do to start changing that a little bit. This is a worksheet that's in the download section of the Freedom Channel. If you are not a subscriber to the Freedom Channel yet, let me put that in the chat so that you can, it's just free resources. That's all it is. So go again, that's in the worksheet section, and download that and just start working on it a little bit. And over the course of, a week or two, and just start to see that your perspective with respect to your body and the self-compassion that you can have can start to change. Okay, so that is pillar number one, self-acceptance and compassion for where you are today. And we are ready then to switch to pillar two, which is habits. It's all about habits. It's building the habits that support you in meeting your goals and breaking the habits that are taking you further away from your goals. You know, our brains are incredibly efficient, right? Every time we do something, we create a neural pathway for it. And then when we do that same thing more and more times, we strengthen that neural pathway until it becomes so easy to do that it becomes basically effortless. And I always think of that, I describe it as, you know, being at the top of a hill with your roller skates on and there being just a smooth, steep hill, right? It's like that. You just get on there, you slide down, there's no effort whatsoever. In fact, it's pretty hard to stop, right? Going down that path. And that's what habits are. And it's kind of an awesome thing because it's the same thing that allows us, you know, to learn an instrument, or, you know, it's the thing that allows you to take your foot off the gas and put it on the brake when you see a red light without really thinking about it. These are incredible mechanisms of our brain. But sometimes, right, sometimes they're put to use in ways that don't serve us so well, like with food. And that goes for both, you know, habits, taking action that we don't want, and also not taking action that we do want to take. So you can, though, definitely learn to change habituated behaviors and build new behaviors if you work with your brain. We know a lot about how the brain works now. Neuroscience has come a really long way. We understand how to work with the brain so that we can break and build habits in a much more effective and easy way. So instead of being, you know, that all or nothing mindset where it's like, I'm either doing it perfectly or I'm not doing it at all, we can kind of play with the middle ground here with something called stepping stones. And stepping stones are just really, I would say, you know, it's tiny steps. It's working on a bigger goal, but allowing yourself to take some time with it and have allowances instead of all or nothing. In the program, we spend time on that process, on all the steps of the process. And so it's a little bit beyond the scope of our time here. But what I do want to give you to get you starting to work on this idea of how to work with your brain to establish habits or break them is for you to identify a small habit that you want to change. Okay. And I really want you to think of it more on a micro level. So I want to start eating healthy, or even I want to give up sugar, right? That's probably not on a micro level. Those are pretty big things. So what I'm talking about is something more like, and choose this for yourself, but I'm thinking something more like I want to give up sugary drinks, right? That's as small as I want you to go here. And then work on achieving this goal through the use of stepping stones, as opposed to saying, okay, tomorrow, this is my last drink with sugar in it. I'm going to go all the way with this and just not do that anymore. Rather than doing that, actually taking a little bit of time with yourself and asking yourself, what is one step that I could take towards this goal that feels pretty easy for me, where there's not a lot of resistance around it. So let's just say, for example, you're somebody who has 2 or 3 sugary drinks a day. All right. An appropriate stepping stone for you might be to say, I'm going to this next week, because we always want to think of it in small chunks of time, like a week. This next week, I'm going to have 2 drinks every day. 2 drinks every day. But that's actually moving you towards your end goal. So at the end of those 7 days, you do something called CEO time, where you sit down, you ask yourself, okay, how did that go for me? This is not a place for judgment, of course. This is a place for you to actually gather some information like a scientist would. Say, how did that goal go for me? Did I manage to have only 2 drinks? And maybe the answer is yes. There were a couple days when I only had one. Okay, awesome. That was a good step for you to take. Maybe on a few days you had three. Then you just evaluate that information. Okay, that wasn't the best stepping stone for me quite yet. I should have done, 2 days at 3 and then the other 5 days at 2 or whatever, and just play with the process, right? There's no like definite formula that every single person has to do it just like this. It's about you, about where you are and the small step that you can take in order to move yourself closer to the goal. And this is actually, it sounds really easy, right? But sometimes it's really hard because the brain comes in and says, oh, Nancy, you're not doing it fast enough. You should just be able to get rid of your sugar drinks. If you would just, push yourself a little bit, then you'd be able to make real progress. And so a lot of times it's more about, allowing yourself to go slow. But when you allow yourself to go slow, you're always making progress and moving towards the goal, instead of that, all or nothing, where you just keep kind of going back and forth, make a little progress, move way back, make a little progress, where you stay right here, right? With the all or nothing, with the pushing yourself to go all the way. You're always right here, as opposed to when you look at it on this micro level and allow yourself to get these, wins week after week, you're actually moving in that direction. And then when that goal is achieved, then you can pick your next one. And this is something that we do work on together in the program, always kind of evaluating stepping stones and resetting them and having accountability and support around them. So again, I think that you choosing something and then working a few phases towards that, checking in with yourself for that CEO time that allows you to gather information, not to judge. And really, I think that you will find that this is actually, it feels slow in the beginning, but it's actually the quickest thing that you will ever do to reach your goals. So that is the second pillar, habits. Breaking and building the ones that serve. And now we can move on to pillar 3, which is about aligning your thoughts to your goals. So any of you who have been around Nuaria for any length of time know that the main principle is your thoughts create your emotions, which then influence your behavior. So anytime we want to make change, and we are focused on over here on the behavior, right? And we're trying to make change with our behavior, but it's inconsistent with our thoughts, then we're relying on willpower. We're relying on, pushing ourselves and struggling against who we really are. And that can only last for a certain amount of time, right? So rather than try to focus on our behavior and change our behavior, if we put our effort into changing our thoughts over here, knowing that our thoughts and our behavior are always going to be consistent in the long run, then putting our time and effort into changing our thoughts to be consistent with the behavior that we want will allow us to effortlessly be able to have the behavior, to do the behavior that we want. So we have to take a look at, our thinking and work there in order to establish for ourselves what it is that we want to do going forward. So for example, you might have some thinking like, there's so much to do. I'm never going to get things done, right? So let's just take a look at that. That line of thinking is going to lead to overwhelm, right? The emotion of overwhelm, and then a certain behavior. Maybe that is emotional eating. Maybe it is not doing the things that serve you, as far as, meal planning or prepping or going home and making food, stopping at a fast food place or something like that. So you can see how your thoughts are creating your behavior in the long run. So if we could take a look at that thinking and change it, then you'd be able to also effortlessly change your behavior. So the first step in changing your behavior, of course, is identifying what are those thoughts that are not serving you, right? Obviously you have to know that you're thinking a thought before you're able to change it. And a lot of these thoughts have been around for so long that we barely even cognizant of the fact that they are being thought by us. They're just so ingrained in us, right? So sometimes it takes a little bit of effort to really understand what is the thinking that is that's back here behind this behavior. But I guarantee if you take any behavior that you want to change and you really look at it and ask yourself, what must I be thinking for me to be behaving this way, you will have identified some really powerful thoughts that you can work on, that you can change. So obviously, just like with all the things that I'm talking about today, thought redirection is not something that, you're going to hear about or we're going to spend 10 minutes on, and then you're going to go off and be experts on it, right? There is a process and a lot of tools and integration that comes along with being able to change your thoughts. But I can give you a tool today that will really help you start to at least kind of get a sense of how that process works and actually give you the ability to change your perspective in some way. I wrote down here, I wanted to read you the quote by Louise Hay, which is one of my favorite when it comes to thought redirection. She says, "The thoughts we choose to think are the tools we use to paint the canvas of our lives." So I really love that. We do create the canvas of our lives through our thoughts. And when we recognize the power that we have with that, it's exciting to recognize, like, I am the creator of my life through my thoughts. And it also is really motivating to be looking at my thoughts. Which ones serve me? Which ones do not? How do I want to go about changing the ones that don't? And once you really realize this and start to utilize it, you recognize, wow, I used to think I was my thoughts. I used to think that I had no choice. Well, that's how I think. And as Maya always talks about, our thoughts are like little puppies, right? Running around our house, chewing up our shoes and our underwear. And that's very much how I used to think, like, I have no control over the puppy. And actually I'm puppy sitting this week for a friend of mine, and this puppy is chewing everything he can find. She can find. So it's just kind of funny. And I'm just, watching her and thinking about, yeah, these are like those little pesky thoughts, exactly, that come in. And we forget, that we have complete control. I can take that puppy every time and rein it back in. And that's what we can do with our thoughts. So how do we go about changing our thoughts? The first thing, like I mentioned, is to start to identify what are the thoughts that are not serving me. Where is my thinking inconsistent with the behavior that I want? Now, once you kind of get one of these thoughts that you're ready to work with, the next thing I want you to do with it is just simply ask yourself the question, how can I see this differently? How can I feel better about this? So let's take the example that that I gave a minute ago. I'm just so busy, I'm never going to get everything done. So you can see how this thought is not serving you because it causes the emotion of overwhelm and then the unwanted behavior. So ask yourself the question, how could I see this differently? How could I feel better about this? And then give yourself the thought that you want to replace it. And we'll talk about how to do that in a second, but maybe something like, I do have a lot on my plate, right? Recognize that there's truth to this and recognize where you are. But I can find a way to do my best with it. And my best is always enough. Something like that. And once you get a hold of your new thought that serves you better, you can start to build the new neural pathway for that thought as opposed to the other one. So there's a lot of tools, like I said, and I had to pick something that I thought would be best for you guys and where you are in the process and all of that. So what I chose to give you today is something called stepping stone thoughts. because it's also very much aligned with the stepping stones that we talked about for habits. So this is the same concept, except we're applying it with our thoughts, okay? Our brains generally ignore statements that are just so far away from our truth that we can't really work with it. It just kind of rejects it, like says, no, that's just not true, right? And it may make us feel better for a second, right? That's why sometimes, positive affirmations are not the end all be all for all people, because if the affirmation is just so far away from my truth, I might listen to it and think, oh, that's nice, but it's not really going to help me change in the long term. So stepping stone thoughts are more about meeting yourself where you are, creating a better feeling thought, but not necessarily a thought that is, perfect or so far away from where I am right now that I can't attach myself to it, that I can't really sink my teeth into it. So, a really good example, and especially in the work that I do, a lot of people say, oh my God, I'm so gross. I'm so overweight. I have to lose weight now, and have these thoughts that are really not serving them, right? Because that creates the emotions of pessimism and despair and self-hatred and things like that. So you're not going to go from a thought like that to a thought that would say, my body is perfect in every way and I don't need to change it ever at all. Right? That kind of thing, your brain would be like, all right, it wouldn't accept it. It wouldn't allow you to really develop a new neural pathway for that thought that's so far away from where you are today. So a better thought might be something like, today I don't feel comfortable in the body that I'm in. It's okay to acknowledge where you are today. It's good, in fact. But that's okay. I accept that. Thankfully, I found a program that's going to help shift me over time. I need to be patient, but change is possible for me. A thought like that, you can get behind. You can develop that new neural pathway. It can become your new thought much more easily than the other kind of thought where, it's just too far away from what you actually believe. If that kind of thought is too much for you, you could simply say, change is underway for me. I believe change is possible. Whatever it is, wherever you need to start. And then when that becomes your new way of thinking, you can slowly move into better and better thoughts. And in that way, the same way we're doing with the habits, you're always making progress towards what you want, always making progress forward by using the stepping stones. So that's the process for you to start to look at with respect to this third pillar. Aligning your thoughts with the behavior that you want. How are we doing, everybody? I know I kind of feel like this is the point where our brains are like, okay, I'm tired now. That's a lot. I'm thinking about all the things that I'm learning and the things that I have to do, but you guys staying with it, okay? If you need to get up, jump up and down. Oh, I was also thought we could take a second for a joke break. Does anybody know what you call a picture that an elf takes of himself? It's an elfie. I know it's pretty lame, but that's what you guys get for, my joke source is like my 9-year-old. So that's kind of what you get with me. Anyway, all right. So that is our first 3 pillars. The fourth pillar is the one I think is not that these first 3 are super easy, but I think that the fourth one is the one that can be the most challenging, and that is developing the emotional resiliency to be able to sit in our emotions. If emotional eating is a challenge, being able to sit in those emotions where we would normally turn to food is probably one of the most difficult areas of weight loss. And it is something that, the Freedom Program is the bulk of the program is really centered on helping with that particular challenge, because it is something that requires a lot of care and attention. So, and support. So emotional eating is just simply turning to food when you aren't actually physically hungry, in response to an emotion that you're experiencing. So many people eat when they feel stress, bored, overwhelmed. That was my big one. Anger, fear, basically any emotion that doesn't feel good, right? And one of the really important things that I want you to take away from this time together, from this webinar, is don't judge yourself for that. Like, that is the most basic human action, to try to give yourself pleasure and take away pain. That we're wired to do that. And when it comes to food, you were trained to do this, right? We were all trained to do this. When we were babies and we cried, someone put a bottle or a breast in our mouths to calm us down, right? We learned from that time that food could do more for us than just fill our bellies. For most of us, our training, for emotional eating started at that time and was reinforced every day, right? You fall off your bike. Oh, here's a cookie, help you feel better. You were a good girl at the doctor. Here's a sucker. I don't know that they do that anymore, but they sure did it when I was a kid. When you were good, you got some kind of a reward. When you didn't feel good, for whatever reason, you were given food. And every way that we celebrate, when we need a pick-me-up, we were taught that food can do this for us. So it's really no surprise, right, that we would do that as adults. We were taught to do that. And the realization that food had that power for us, right, formed the basis of a lot of the unwanted food habits that we have today. But it's not something to judge yourself for. In fact, it was pretty brilliant that we had something to turn to, something that could help us in a lot of situations, especially when we were young, that we didn't have other tools, right? So yes, it served us very well at those times in our life before today, because now you can start developing other tools that work a lot better for you than food. But there's no judgment around having done that in the past. It was, of course, right, a totally basic action. So I want you to really think about that and consider that you've never done anything wrong with food and you have nothing to be ashamed of. Overcoming and emotionally eating these challenges involves, understanding your relationship with your emotions, becoming aware of, what's happening here for you. When I feel this emotion, this is the food that I turn to. This is what I do. And then being able to, like I said, kind of stand in that place and say, all right, these are the emotions. I used to think that I couldn't be here with them. I didn't have a way to process them, but I'm open to the idea that I can now process my emotions in ways that don't involve food, right? And that is a process, of course, that takes place over time as you integrate the various tools and get to know yourself and your challenges a little bit better. And as you do that, as you develop awareness, as you start to work the tools, I really encourage you to put on that scientific lab coat that I've been talking about and adopt the attitude of, let's get curious about that, right? Instead of that old way of thinking about, oh no, this is terrible that I'm doing this. Why do I do this? Why can't I control yourself? Setting all of that aside and just really looking at it. Oh, isn't this interesting? I was just, sitting here doing my work and now all of a sudden I'm headed to the pantry and not even hungry. That's curious. I overeat, at dinner time every night. I just keep going, even though, my stomach feels good. But I keep going with my food. Isn't that interesting? I wonder why I do that. Let me start to think about that, right? And so in that way, we can start to put some energy into what will ultimately yield the solution, instead of putting all of our energy into, oh no, I shouldn't be doing this. I need to stop. How can I stop? Oh, when all of our energy is going into that, we already know that's not an effective solution. That's not going to get us anywhere. So let's stop putting energy into the judgment, into the, into the battle, into the confrontation, and put it into what can actually help, which is conversation and some awareness around what's happening for us. So with emotional eating, I want to leave you today. I want to give you 3 tips that I want you to think about, a new perspective maybe. And also I am going to give you the tool that you can start to work with today. So tip number 1 is I want you to realize that every time you have the desire to eat food when you aren't hungry, it's a signal from your soul that you need something, right? You're needing something at that moment. And by simply acknowledging that, instead of thinking, like I was saying, instead of thinking, oh no, this is terrible, I'm a bad person, or whatever the thoughts are, just really understand, okay, I must be needing something. Something's going on for me. I wonder what it is. You're just trying to achieve a different state through the use of food. That's all that's happening. It's a very simple, very normal, very understandable thing. The second tip is that I want you to recognize also that this is a normal, natural reaction of a habituated brain. So just like we talked about when we talked about the habits, you have taught your brain to eat in this way. You had the emotion, you turned to food. You had the emotion, you turned to food. The brain is trying to do you a favor. The brain's like, oh, I know what to do here. She taught me to do this, right? It's like the puppy again. It's like, sit, I get a treat. Sit, I get a treat. And the same thing with your brain. You have taught it to be very efficient. And the things that we've taught it over and over to be so efficient with, right, we do them on autopilot. These are the things that we, again, with the roller skates and the smooth hill, right? We don't need to think about, should I have the food? What should I do in this situation? I'm feeling this emotion. We no longer have to spend all that energy, right? The brain thinks it's doing you a favor. It's like, oh, hey, Lori, here's those emotions again. Don't worry, I know what to do. I'm going to go to the kitchen. I'll get us some food. You just keep, go about your business here because I got this. So recognizing, this is just my brain doing this. And once you can really sink your teeth into the understanding, this is just my brain. This isn't even me that wants to do this. This is just my habituated brain following the neural pathway that I laid down and strengthened through my past actions. That's all it is. There's nothing, there's no beast inside you demanding food. You are not some hopeless addict. None of that is true. You just have a neural pathway that got really strong. The third tip that I want to give you is to really, in those moments when you are triggered, in that moment when you recognize that you are going to have food or continue to eat food, whatever it is, really focus on the solution, right? And that is getting in touch with yourself, with what I refer to as your higher self. Right? That part of you that is calm and patient and has access to your good ideas. If you can start to recognize that's the real goal in those moments. It's not to control yourself. It's to reconnect with yourself, find out what you're feeling, what you're needing, what your choices are, all of that. And I'll have more to say about that higher self, because that's just such an important key and something that we'll want to keep coming back to. And that's the real work, is learning how to come back to your higher self in those moments, instead of just being your robotic self that is just going to automatically eat the food, and then you're going to wake up later and be like, why did I do that? What's going on? So those are some perspective shifts I hope that you can start to see about your behaviors of food. You're not doing anything wrong. In fact, you are, you could thank your brain for being so incredibly efficient. But you can also recognize that you have the ability to change your brain, neuroplasticity. You are the boss. I'm the boss of this puppy this week. You're the boss of your brain. And we have power in our lives and over our behaviors when we have the right tools, the understanding and the tools. That's all we need. So the tool I want to give you with respect to emotional eating is called the 2-minute pause. It is a tool that one of many tools that is actually given in the Freedom Program. There is a download for this, and it's located in the free masterclass area of the Freedom Channel. So you'll find it there. And I really do encourage you to print it off and put it somewhere handy, because we're going to talk about it and you're going to think right now while you're in your untriggered mind, you're going to be like, oh yeah, those are easy steps. I'll remember those, no problem. Or you might even have a couple words for each of the steps. But when you're in that triggered space, and your automatic or your survival brain is the one that is calling the shots, is the one that's driving the car, so to speak, it's a different story. And so having this to look at when you're in that space is going to be really helpful. So it is an exercise that has 4 steps. It's an exercise that is predicated on the idea of wiggling in that space between when you first have the a feeling triggered, when you first have the thought, I want to eat food, and when you actually act, when you actually, get up and start, go to the pantry or whatever. So there's a space in between there. And that's where all of your power is. So this exercise is meant for you to stand in that space. And it's 2 minutes right now. And you'll be able to, as you practice and as you become more proficient, you'll be able to create more of that space. It's 2 minutes now, but it will grow, and you'll be able to stand in that place for as long as you need to at some point. But for right now, our goal is about 2 minutes. And, it's 2 minutes is something that I chose because I think that it's a good place for a lot of people. It may not be your perfect place. Your perfect place may be 30 seconds, or even in the beginning, 10 seconds. It doesn't matter. You have not failed if you don't do 2 minutes. It's just standing in that space. However long you can do that today is perfect. It's the same as all the other stuff we've been talking about. Meet ourselves where we are, and then be always making that little bit of progress moving forward. So here's how it works. Okay. I want you to, at the point when you first are feeling like you want to reach for food, but you aren't hungry, I want you to stop and set a timer. Now, the timer is very useful because, like I said, when you're in that triggered space, all you can see, all you can feel is that very moment. You're being driven by your survival brain in that moment. And that moment feels like eternity. This 2 minutes may feel like eternity because your survival brain is saying, Andrea, what are you doing? Don't stand in it. This is like a dangerous place right here. If we stand here in these 2 minutes, your survival system doesn't know that you're just feeling some uncomfortable emotions. Your survival system thinks you're being chased by a tiger. So the idea of stopping and waiting these 2 minutes is very, feels dangerous, right? And so it takes some effort to overcome that and to actually be able to sit in these 2 minutes. So having the timer, seeing it count down can really help you, just be in there and be willing to feel that danger, to feel what's happening in your body when you're in that triggered state. So having the sheet there for you, handy in the kitchen, wherever you think it'd be most useful for you, having the timer, watching the seconds tick down are small things. They may sound like, I don't really need that. But if you're struggling at all with doing the practice, these things can actually be the difference between being able to do them and not being able to. Okay, so once you are in that space, you've set your timer and you're ready to go, you can go through the steps. All right, so let's do an example just so that it's a little bit more clear. Let's say I'm sitting at my desk, I'm working on a project, and all of a sudden I find myself ready to get up and go into the kitchen. I may not even immediately know why. Maybe I have some feeling in my stomach, some, edginess or whatever it is that I can't even identify. And chances are I don't even want to identify it, right? Whatever it is, just stay away from me. I know I don't like you, So I'd rather go to the pantry and eat something and ignore you completely, right? So this is the perfect time to use the 2-minute pause. So you're going to go through 4 steps, like I mentioned. The first step is, and this is in the download, is to take a few deep breaths. Or maybe we're going to talk a little bit about something called somatic experiencing. Maybe at some point, depending on your tools and everything, you could do something like that. But the point of this first step is for you to get calm, right? When you're triggered, you're being driven by your survival system, by your primitive brain, or what's sometimes referred to as your lower limbic brain. It's all the same. You're being driven by that part of your brain that is concerned with your survival. Right? You feel like in that moment that you're being chased by an animal, something is dangerous to you, right? And so the goal of the first step is just to kind of calm down, try to calm your survival system so that you can have access to your higher self, what I was mentioning before. Your higher self, that's your prefrontal cortex. That's your more evolved brain. That's who we truly are. It's and we want access to that because that part of our brain, has a picture of the long term. It has my goals in mind. It's creative. It has ideas, and it can make conscious choice. So right now, when we're triggered, we only have access to our lower brain. That's what is driving us. So we want to create that connection again between our lower and our higher brain, bring in the tools that the higher brain has available to us so that we can make a choice that feels good to us in the big picture instead of a choice that's automatic or a choice that is coming from our need to survive in the moment. All right, so that's the first step. Take a couple of deep breaths. You're not going to be perfect at this at first, but you're going to, every time you do it, every time you're willing to try, you are going to become more and more proficient at accessing your higher self. You have to be willing to do this practice a lot of times without feeling like you've been successful. But every time you do it, you were a success, no matter how it turns out. So that's step number 1. Step number 2 is just to observe and recognize what's happening. So I would say to myself, okay, I was sitting there, I was working on the project. Next thing I know, felt a heaviness or felt whatever, and I wanted to get up and eat. Okay, I see what's going on here. My habituated brain knows that whenever I have that feeling, I can get rid of it by eating. Oh, okay. I see what's going on here, right? I'm stepping away from my brain, away from my thoughts, and I'm connecting with the part of me that is watching me do these things. All right. So I'm going to observe. That's the second step. And it happens very quickly, right? These are steps that you don't have to spend a lot of time on. You can recognize what's going on. The third step is to have a conversation. Okay, so have a conversation, try to get in touch with what's actually going on, what you're needing, what you're feeling. Question that I love to ask here is, what do you want the food to do for you? So maybe as I'm working on this project, I'm bored and I want the food to give me some excitement. Maybe I'm afraid I'm not doing a good job on the project and I want it to soothe me, or maybe I feel overwhelmed by the project. There's not an end in sight, those kind of things. And I want the food to comfort me there. So just asking that question, what do I want this food to do for me? And then when you've answered the question, you can move on to the next step, step 4, which is make a decision. You get to decide. Am I going to eat right now, or am I going to try something else? And it's okay if you choose to eat, but understand it is a choice. Understand it is a choice that you made and that you have a choice. So I'm going to tell you something about this 2-minute pause that's super, super, super important. The goal of the 2-minute pause is not to prevent you from eating. And you're like, what? That's the whole purpose. That's what I want here. Give me something that will stop me from eating. But I can't give you that. That does not exist, right? You've tried those things and it doesn't work. What does work is for you to meet the underlying need. And that's what the 2-minute pause will help you to start to do. And then as a byproduct of that, you won't want the food. But in the beginning, you have to be willing to do this process, and maybe much of the time you will still choose to eat at the end. But what most people find is that they are much slower, much more intentional about it. It's going to end up being probably less, and all those things are wins, right? But at the end of the day, what are you doing? What is the real goal of the 2-minute pause? It's to reconnect with yourself so that you can make conscious choice instead of those just following the automatic behavior. When you're in that moment, when you're doing the 2-minute pause, in the beginning, the only thing that's available to your brain is the old behavior, right? That's the only neurological pathway that is there. It's your roller skates at the top of the hill. That's the only thing you can see. But every time you do the 2-minute pause, you are creating a new neurological pathway to follow the next time and the next time. But here's the thing with new pathways, the new pathway, if the old one is the downhill smooth path with your roller skates on, the new path is carving a path through the jungle with a butter knife, right? If you're standing at that juncture and you're like, go down the hill on with my skates or carve a new path through the jungle with a butter knife, you can see that it's going to take, some effort. It's going to take some time before your new pathway is one that your brain will stand there and say, oh, I could also go down this new path, right? So you have to be willing to create the path. So when you're doing the 2-minute pause, think of it like I'm making progress because I am carving this new path. I am laying down a new foundation or new pathway. Maybe I'm not following it every time right now, but that's okay because I'm creating it and I'm strengthening it. And I'm going to get to the point one day where I'm going to be in that position and my brain's going to say, oh, hey, there are 2 choices here. And you're going to start to take that new pathway more and more, which is doing something else, which is meeting your needs in a way that feels better, is in alignment with your goals. I know that's hard because we want things that work. We want, that we want to feel that control, but this really is the way to get there. So just be willing to do the pause and know that every time you do it, even if you just remember that it's something that you can do, that is progress. And so celebrate that and have some patience with yourself around this practice. So that is the 4th pillar. That is the tool that I have for you there. And if you guys are feeling ready, we'll dive into the last pillar, pillar number 5, which is learning the nutrition that works best for your body to be able to lose weight. Now, there is no single way of eating that is successful for everybody because every body is different, right? Factors like your genes, what part of the world your ancestors came from, the chemicals you're exposed to, your metabolism, your age, your microbiome, all of these things affect what happens to the food that comes into your body. So how can, with all of those things being so different for all of us, how can one plan, right, be best or be ideal for everybody, right? The only person who really knows what you should be eating is you. So the important thing there is to start to establish a relationship with your body so you can start to gather that information. And one of the things that, I see a lot is that women are trying to make progress with their health and weight goals by buying into, propaganda like, okay, keto is the way to go. If you do keto, this is going to happen for you. Or if you do paleo, or if you do intermittent fasting or whatever it is, then you're going to have the same results as somebody else, right? And that's just not true. And when you do that, you ignore the signals from your body, you make it hard. Working with your body is always going to lead to better results in the long run. Okay. I also want to point out that we change over time. So what worked for you in your 20s and 30s is not very likely to be the same kind of thing that works for you in your 40s and 50s and beyond. And I always take the example, intermittent fasting is such a good example, because for some people, it can be a wonderful tool, something that they feel great doing, something that helps their bodies. I like it for myself, but if somebody is in a state of overwhelm, adrenal fatigue, all kinds of, different things, intermittent fasting is actually going to exacerbate their problems. So it's not going to be for everybody. So that's why we have to, look at advice, try things on. If we feel like it's something for us, go ahead and, play with it a little bit, but always trying things on with the understanding of, I need to make this my own. I need to hear what my body thinks about this and work with it instead of trying to, put it in a box that it just doesn't fit in. That's not even good for what you're trying to do. So with respect to this pillar, I would really suggest that you just take a period of time, depending on where you are in your journey, maybe a couple weeks, and just really let go of all the old preconceived notions about what is good food, what is not good food, if you're good or bad for eating certain things, and just really tune into your body and ask it, what do I want to eat? When do I want to eat? How much do I want to eat? And for a lot of people, having trust in their body, they think, oh no, listening to my body is how I got in this position in the first place. But that's not really true. Our bodies do not ask for more food than we need. And our bodies much of the time are going to lead us into a healthy and balanced diet, to some degree. So I would just encourage you to experiment with this a little bit and really let go of the restriction, because what we do know about restriction is that it is the breeding ground for unwanted patterns with food. It really is. And that's a biological thing for us. When we were hunters and gatherers, when restriction came around, we needed these things. We needed more hunger hormones. We needed to be pushed into eating beyond our levels of satiation, because we didn't know when we were going to come across food again. So restriction in any form, even if it's just us thinking that we shouldn't be eating food, breeds behaviors with food that don't serve us. So letting go of the restriction is a kind of a first step. And I think that afterwards, and what we do in the Freedom Program, is once we've developed that kind of good communication with our body and we're really listening to what it's telling us, then we can start to play with other aspects. We can start to play with the amounts of sugar, dairy, and grains that we want to have in our lives and that will allow us to achieve our goals. And that is something that's just very individualized, depending on who you are and what food works for your body. Okay, we all have a lot of intolerances and things that we can look at and just experiment with. But ultimately, it comes down to creating a plan, a structure that feels good for the rest of your life, not a diet, something that you're going to do for a short period of time and then, go off of it at some later point. We also have, through our registered dietitian, Maya, we also have the medical nutrition therapy that's available for people who really want to optimize, medicine is our food is our medicine kind of thing, and really understand their body and better, and how food plays into that. And, so that's like another piece that is available. But for this pillar, for this tool that I want to leave you with is to start listening. Letting go of the old paradigm around what's good and bad, and just really starting to trust your body, because it does know, right? And when you combine this with the other pillars, right, your listening is more helpful, and you're no longer, eating when you're not hungry and things like that. So these are the 5 pillars of successful permanent weight loss. Okay. Again, self-acceptance and compassion for yourself, even while you work towards change. The Body Love Worksheet can help you in that direction. Building habits that serve, breaking those that don't. And I invited you there to look at a micro habit that you could start to work on over time with stepping stones. Pillar 3 was harnessing the power of your thoughts, right? So thinking, what are the thoughts that are aligned with the behavior that I want, and putting your effort into changing your thoughts as opposed to changing your behavior. Pillar 4, learning to allow your emotions and being able to sit in them and process them without the need of food. Gave you the 2-minute pause there. And then this 5th pillar that we just talked about, listening to your body, losing the food restrictions, and then gradually getting in touch with the amount of dairy, grains, and sugar that is appropriate for you to feel good and then ultimately to be able to release extra weight. So these are, the 5 pillars. People who are able to focus on these and achieve these get results. This is how, and they get results. And I don't just mean, losing weight. I mean, developing a good and healthy relationship with food, right? Where food is no longer something that they feel like they have to control themselves around and it sucks up their time and energy. This is how we become nourished through our food as opposed to controlled by it. But obviously, it's not so easy to achieve these pillars. It's something maybe, sometimes people are able to try for a little while and do okay and then fall off the wagon, so to speak. Or maybe they just feel like, I don't really have the energy to begin this in the first place, to take this on, right? And that's why I needed to share with you, and a really important part of this webinar is the little known secret that helps you achieve these 5 things. All right. And the little known secret is your nervous system. So I want to start by giving you some really just basic information about your nervous system. Your nervous system, you can think of it like the electrical switchboard of your body, right? It's like an electrochemical operating system. It communicates with us through sensations, through nerve activation, neurotransmitters, other signals about our relationship in the environment, about whether we're safe, whether there are threats in the environment, what we should do to keep ourselves safe. There are essentially 3 states of the nervous system, and I'll just very briefly describe them. The first is sympathetic. That's your fight or flight. That's when you're feeling, kind of all worked up. You feel like you have to take some action. You're feeling stress, maybe panic, anxiety are all characteristics of the sympathetic state. You feel like you are in danger. Those kinds of feelings. That's, if you're experiencing that you are in your sympathetic state. Your nervous system is in sympathetic state. In parasympathetic, we call this, sometimes you may have heard it referred to as your rest and digest state. This is where you are feeling calm and relaxed. You feel safe without perception or memory of threat. When we're in this state, our bodies heal. We're able to sleep and we're just functioning optimally. And what I really want you to understand for our purposes here is when you're in the parasympathetic state, you have access to that higher brain that I keep talking about, your most evolved self. Okay, and we'll talk more about that. And already we've talked about why that is so important in making conscious choice as opposed to just going down with our automatic behaviors. And the third state is, I'll call it the freeze state, because that's what we feel like. We feel like we're just frozen. We feel in this state, we feel exhaustion. We may feel collapsed, disoriented, numb, apathetic. We may have a sense of hopelessness, helplessness, resignation, right? Just really lacking energy and motivation. When that's the case, we're in the freeze state, overwhelm. So these are the 3 states. And as I said, that parasympathetic state is where we can make changes. When we're in the parasympathetic state, we're able to achieve the pillars. So the little known secret is working with your nervous system to be able to spend more and more time in your parasympathetic state. Okay, so what I really I want you to understand about your nervous system is that most of us, 90% or more of us, have been experienced at least one traumatic event in our life. Most of us have dealt with a lot of stress in our lives, that stress that has accumulated over time. We haven't had the ability or the tools to process it. And because of trauma and accumulated stress, we're living with a nervous system that is in survival, in the survival state. So whether that's fight or flight, sympathetic, or overwhelm, freeze, it doesn't matter. It's survival state, right? We're not living in our parasympathetic. We're in survival state. And it may be that we've been there so long that we don't even recognize that that's where we are. It's just kind of, we gotten used to it. So, I had noticed very early on in my work that most of the people, all of the people that I was working with had this history of trauma and accumulated stress. And so I recognized it as a piece to this puzzle, and I started to research and I started to educate both myself and then taking certification programs and attending retreats and really diving into how trauma and accumulated stress affects our nervous system and our ability to make change. And this is why it's such an important part of the work that I do, and something that's very unique to Freedom is that if we can start with a healthy nervous system, if we can have a regulated nervous system that is able to spend time in the parasympathetic state, then achieving these 5 pillars that are the same for everybody suddenly becomes possible. Now, maybe I'll back up a bit, because sometimes when people hear trauma, they think, well, that's not me. I didn't have trauma in my life, because they're thinking of trauma as things like, a catastrophic event, living through a war zone or a natural disaster, being a victim or a witness of really awful abuse. But trauma, while it certainly does apply to these things, trauma is just simply something that overwhelms the nervous system of the individual. So that's different for everybody. And it's also something that can happen over time. So, a lot of times we suffer from little micro traumas day after day that are constantly pushing us towards our point of overwhelm. And then we get to a point and we, have a slight car accident, or, the death of a pet or something else happens, and it pushes us beyond that line of overwhelm. That event was traumatic for us because it was more than we could handle. And that's really all trauma is. So when I say that 90%, more than 90% of Americans, this is a statistic from Psychology Today, have experienced a traumatic event. It really does pertain to, lots of things that you might think of as just kind of normal life, but we were never meant to spend the time in our survival mode. We were not meant to be in sympathetic or in freeze for significant periods of time. We were meant to be there, get ourselves out of trouble, and then return to our parasympathetic state. So these traumas and accumulated stresses have altered our nervous state. Right. And I'm not going to go into all the science around it, but very briefly, I just want to tell you how people with trauma and accumulated stress that have not been processed, living in their survival state, how does that affect your ability to meet the 5 pillars? Okay, so there's 5 reasons that I'm going to tell you about. Number 1, a person who's experienced traumas and accumulated stress, you're just going to be triggered a lot more often. We're going to be in situations where we feel like we need something to cope. Number 2, we're just going to have a harder time with impulse control, because when we're in our survival state, we want to be impulsive because we need to act quickly. So we're going to have trouble with impulse control. The third thing is we're going to have a harder time regulating our emotions. That part of our brain that does that for us is not on board when we're in survival mode. Number 4, we're going to have a harder time self-soothing. And number 5, when you're in a state, especially in that state of overwhelm that I was describing, you can't make change. You don't have energy for anything. That's the definition of the freeze state. That's the definition of overwhelm. You're already, trying to operate beyond your energy resources. So trying to take on the 5 pillars, trying to establish new habits, trying to create new neural pathways takes energy. So if you're living in a state of overwhelm, you don't have the energy to do that. So working with your nervous system is a foundational piece of being able to achieve the 5 pillars, right? This is what I'm really excited about, being able to bring this to people, because, when you realize that, hey, I'm not a failure, right? I'm not lacking willpower. I'm not a hopeless case. It's just my nervous system needs some tuning. It needs some healing so that I can go on to achieve the things that I want to in life. Being stuck in survival mode, that we can't achieve anything that we want to. Yes, we're out there, we're functioning, and we're getting by, but we're not thriving. And in order to thrive and in order to meet your goals, you need a nervous system that will allow you to do that. And that's what I was talking about before with respect to your higher brain and that more evolved aspect of yourself. You only have access to that when you're in your parasympathetic state. So we need that when we want to harness the power of our conscious brain that can see the big picture and can take the action that's consistent with what we want, instead of being reactionary, instead of being shut down and just being able to, put on those roller skates and fly down the same old hill that we've been down over and over. So with respect to your nervous system, we spend the first 6 weeks of freedom is simply laying that foundation, really focusing on the nervous system. It involves understanding, getting to know your nervous system, being aware of what state you're in throughout the day, watching what the signs are for you, especially the early signs when you first start to kind of slide into that sympathetic or freeze. What does that look like for you, so that you can work with your nervous system at that point when you still have a lot of power, and get yourself back into parasympathetic. And, it's about learning the effective tools that are best for you. And then it's about using those tools first in easy situations, and then being able to use them in more and more challenging situations. So again, this is a really important foundational piece that we start with. And it does take some time, right? It takes experiences, it takes living and paying attention to your nervous system to really develop this practice. But I do want to offer you something today that I think will be really useful for you. It's a somatic experiencing exercise. And if you've not heard of somatic experiencing, it's totally fine. It's a kind of a big word that just means, hey, I'm paying attention to my nervous system and I am feeding it some cues to establish some safety for myself. Because when we feel safe, we can be in that parasympathetic. We can feel calm and peaceful and have the energy to do the work that we want to. So somatic experiencing is just using the body to send those messages to the nervous system. And it's, like I said, it's super simple. It is very, it's visceral, right? We're using the body to do that. And we're just trying to pay attention to the nervous system and get to know it a little bit. So I'd like to give you a tool that we can use today. And Eileen, I know you are a expert at many of the tools, and so you will recognize this one. But the one I chose for us today is called either creating space, or you might hear it referred to as the push away. And this is a great exercise when we're in those situations where we feel like, everything is just weighing down on us. We might be feeling overwhelmed. We might be feeling just kind of riled up, a lot of different things. And I'll talk you through the exercise first, and then we'll do it all together. And again, it's very, very simple. We're using the body to send messages to the nervous system. And this is a very basic system. So we're not using, a lot of thoughts or anything. We're just literally tuning into our bodies and how they're reacting to the actions that we're taking. So the push away, we're just going to kind of get settled into our body and really notice that we have bodies, right? I'm going to feel my feet on the floor. Actually, I have a roller underneath. I'm going to feel my feet there, feel that pushing up against me, and just kind of feel grounded and settled in my body. I'm going to notice my hips, the weight of my hips in the chair. I'm going to just take a second and connect to my body. The push away is done by literally pushing away an imaginary boulder. So we're going to start in a minute with our hands up close to our chest. And we're going to put some tension on our arms. We're going to feel that there's, this heavy object in front of us. And then we're slowly going to push this object away from us, keeping the tension on our hands, right? We want to go slow. We want to imagine and really feel like we are pushing something away from us. You can breathe if you want to use your breath to, kind of follow your hands. You can close your eyes. I like to do that. A lot of people feel really vulnerable when they close their eyes, so they do not like that. It doesn't help establish a sense of safety for them. So you just have to kind of get to know yourself and what works better for you. And then when you get to the end, when you've pushed your boulder out, you can decide what you want to do with your hands. Just let it integrate a little bit. You can keep them here. You can create more space by going out to the side. Maybe at some point, if you take this tool and you're working with it, you even want to extend it overhead. Whatever works for you. You have the replay to this as well. You could skip to this part and we can do it together again. But if you guys are ready, I would love to do this with you. And again, we're just going to make sure we're kind of connected in our bodies and with our hands up close to our chest. I close my eyes. I always do. It really helps me pay attention to my nervous system. Just maybe take a second to notice, is there anything going on for you? Is there tension somewhere? Is there, like a tightness in your belly, or kind of excitement or anything? Just notice that. And when you're ready, go ahead and start pushing away your boulder. Keeping the tension, going pretty slow. When you get to the end, just let it integrate. You can either keep them there or you can move it out to the side. I like to create lots of space. For me, whenever I do that, I feel a little bit of a softening in my belly. And when I open my eyes, I feel like the space is expansive now. I feel like I've created space for myself. I didn't feel overwhelmed when I started it, so I didn't have like a really big reaction. But if I do this when I am feeling overwhelmed, I actually will feel, when I open my eyes, I feel a little bit giddy that I have created this space for me. Okay, things are not coming in on me. I do have the space to be able to just do what I need to take care of stuff. So depending on the state of your nervous system, when you do it, you might experience different kinds of reactions. And if you're somebody who says, I don't feel anything, well, that's okay, because this may be your very first somatic practice, and it's not something that you necessarily have to feel this big shift right away. It's something that once you start tuning into your nervous system and you start to notice those subtle differences, and your nervous system starts to react and feed you more information. So this is something that's very experiential. It does happen over time, but I do think that if you took this tool with you and you worked it in to your day here and there, when you first start to feel like, oh, I'm at work, or I'm just feeling nervous about something, my thoughts have me going down a path where I'm feeling kind of less than desirable, and pull this tool out and just start to work with it. The first 6 weeks, as I mentioned, of Freedom is all about establishing a practice in somatic experiencing. And we do a video each day for 42 days and really help you get to know your nervous system and give you control. People in that class have really had a lot of beautiful shifts as they learn that they have control. They don't have to slip down into the freeze and feel that overwhelm. They don't have to feel that panic and anxiety and feelings of the sympathetic state. So it's been very, very powerful. And so once you establish that foundation and your nervous system you're spending more and more time in your parasympathetic, then the 5 pillars that we talked about, you can get in there, you can do them, and they feel so much easier than the other times when you've tried to do them, but you're doing them from your place of survival, right? Engaged in your survival system. So this is a lot of information. I know that it's just, I wanted to kind of give that big picture, even though it is a lot, because I think that when you see that big picture, you can really, give yourself the grace and start to take the small actions that will keep moving you forward. What I would suggest that you do is, number one, download the handouts that I mentioned, and also go through your notes from today. Make sure you really understand what it is that you're trying to do and the tools, how you're going to use them. Maybe make a plan for yourself, and then ask yourself, what do I need to be successful in these? What kind of support do I need? What, just giving yourself that ability to have what you need as you start this journey, which I'm super excited that you're on and that you spent this time with me. Maybe some of you are thinking, I'm ready. I want to make these changes in my life. I want to adopt the 5 pillars. I want to work on them. I want to establish regulation for my nervous system. And if that's the case, then, Freedom is open for enrollment. It's a year-long program, because, changes take time, and it's not that it takes a year to start seeing really incredible shifts. But if we want to, get in there, make these shifts, and really solidify them with each other and have the support we need, the year-long is the way to do it. It is the curriculum, the tools, and the one-on-one support that will get you where you want to go. I would definitely encourage you, if you're thinking that it's something, even if you're just thinking about it, toying with the idea, let's have a discovery call so that we can talk about where you are and what you might most benefit from. Even if that is, a few extra things for you, I'd be happy to talk with you about where you are and what might be most helpful to you. This challenge is definitely something I see women like incredibly overcome these challenges every single day, but it is something that is very difficult to do on your own. I know that from my personal experience, and I would love to be able to help you on that journey in whatever way I can and support you. I do this work because I hate the fact that women are, constantly being told that the reason why they have extra weight is because they're not doing something right. That is not true. That's the biggest lie out there, right? That's not what is happening. You need the tools and the support in order to do this, but it is totally possible. So I'm excited to find out where this information, how you take this information, how you use it to go forward to make this the year that you put these challenges behind you once and for all. So that is kind of the end of the content portion of the webinar, but I do want to just, I've got about 15 minutes to answer any questions. And like I said, if later you're working on something or you're thinking about it and you have some more questions, email me, or we can certainly set up the discovery call as well. I'm here for that continued support. But what questions do you guys have, if any, today on the content that we covered? Anything? Did everything make sense? Maybe that's a better question.
It absolutely made sense. I really like how you're very organized with your presentation, but it's, I think in my listening, I start thinking about what you're instructing, and then I go into the place of feeling it. And then I kind of lost a little bit of the listening. So I'm really grateful that we can like rewatch it instead of like trying to put all the notes together. But I would like to see that the body love. I'm curious about that. The body love exercise. So I guess I'll see that in the channel.
Yes.
So
yeah, I totally get that. Like, I think, we're all different in that regard as far as, but for me, about 20 minutes of listening is the point where I start to, wander a little bit. So yeah, watching the replay will be great. Thank you. I appreciate you. Yeah. Anything else? Anybody have any other comments or questions, or any way that I can support you today as you get started on this beautiful journey? Are you guys, you can either raise your hand, you can certainly speak, you can unmute yourself, or you can put in the chat, is this something that you're really getting excited about for your 2022? Is this the year for you to really dive in and start living in the body that, matches who you are inside? Anybody feeling like, yeah.
absolutely. This is it, 2022.
This is it, right?
Gotta integrate the learning and apply it and continue the support, I kind of love how even in some of the group work that we've done, even though we're from different places, different ages, different cultural backgrounds, whatever, we all have that same kind of human experience of really wanting to be healthier and just like looking for tools that are going to work. That's not some kind of hype. It's just real work, real information, and a great explanation of, well, no wonder this is happening this way. No wonder. That makes so much sense, being in a perpetual traumatic experience, that kind of stressor, and how stress can add weight. No matter how healthy you're eating, stressors can still add weight. So it's just a matter of trying to get into the state, and it's like practicing it when it occurs, and practicing it actually before, and then trying it on when it does occur to see how it actually works and to be in a calmer state. I think because of the pandemic and everything that everybody else has been going through, no wonder we're so kind of like defensive and wanting to go to food for comfort and do what, but maybe that's not what our body needs, even though that's what we thought it would need, because that's what we used to do all the time.
That's right.
Grab the Cheetos, grab the pizza. It's like, and then you don't feel any better after you eat it anyway. So it's not actually addressing it, but addressing the discomfort or addressing the stress or addressing that there is stress and not being in denial of it. I think those would be some of the pieces that's going to really help. And then kind of just get over it. Like, okay, I don't need the sugary drinks. I can drink water. I mean, that'll satiate me, but That's not gonna give me any more comfort than understanding that I'm just feeling a little uncomfortable and it's only temporary.
Yeah, yeah, that's beautiful. And I love what you said about, let's focus on the tools, let's focus on, because when we do that, when we do the work, like you said, yes, we get what we want in the area of food and body, but we also get what we want in every other area of our life, because the tools that we use to reconnect with ourselves and to support ourselves, to love ourselves, to have compassion, all those things change the rest of our lives as well. So doing that work, it just, the benefits extend far beyond our relationship with food and body. So I'm glad that that for you is like, yeah, it's about the work as much as it is anything else. Yeah. Beautiful. Well, I really want to thank you guys for spending time with me, for being here, for being on this journey, because it's, it is a beautiful, beautiful journey. And you're not only making your life better, but you're making the world better by working on yourself and doing the things that you're doing. So I appreciate you from that perspective as well. Don't forget, if you have questions later as you start to implement some things or want to talk about, more about freedom, more about, other options for you, because there are other options, then schedule a discovery call with me. The link is in the Freedom channel. And yeah, and let's make this a year, let's stay in touch. The Facebook group together, we can, continue to just touch base there and just support each other as we go through the year and really just meet our goals and become the people that we know we are, right? Yeah. So, okay. Well, thank you again. We'll stop the recording, and I look forward to hearing from each of you as far as how things are going and what, here we go.